So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're located. Welcome to Advocating for the Future of Service Learning. I'm Amy Mewers. I'm the CEO for the National Youth Leadership Council, and I'm here with Michael Minks from Youth Service America. We're really excited to take a deep dive into advocating for the future of service learning. And so, as you can see up on the screen, we have our Coalition for Service Learning website, and we're going to be using that throughout our session today. Again, we encourage you to use the chat, show your faces if you'd like. We'd love to see you. But really, I want to share a little bit about the Coalition for Service Learning and the work that we're doing. So Mike and I are going to share quite a bit of information, but we really want this to be interactive. So feel free to jump in, unmute, pop in with your questions throughout this session. Sorry, I'm also admitting people at the same time. So the Coalition is really a group of folks that have come together from the education and youth development fields to organize an effort to renew funding for service learning for schools and community organizations across the United States. So we know that we need greater participation by our young people in our nation's civic life. And the final report from the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service, which was published in 2020, and we had the opportunity to hear from one of the commissioners during that conference. They did 2 years of study, and that report called for a dramatic increase in service learning opportunities in K-12 or for K-12 students. We know that service learning gives young people problem-solving skills, the academic skills they need to be successful in school as well as in democratic life, right? So that report, unfortunately, that release and the timing, the pandemic, all coming together at once, I don't think that report got the notoriety that it deserved. The commission didn't set out to look for service learning. Like, they were looking across the board at public, national, military service. And what they kept hearing was, we need service learning, right? So this wasn't a report focused on service learning, but the results are service learning is one of the largest recommendations in the report, that we need to invest as a nation in service learning as a strategy to engage our young people. So the Coalition came together, and I'll share more about members and all of that in just a little bit, but came together quickly to say, this is a recommendation, we need to push this forward. And one of the ways to do that was to encourage a reallocation of funding to the Learn and Serve Fund that is already authorized under the Corporation for National and Community Service. So I just want to share a little bit of, more about the report. And so we have a recording here from the commission. So I just want to share this with you. And actually, I'm going to stop share here quickly and reshare it, because I realized that I did not hit the audio. So here we go. Wonderful. So I'm going to share this video. Here we go.
For service learning, I think this is something near and dear to the audience here. I think I will reiterate what the commission found was really a lack of understanding of what service learning was.
This is me.
And when we looked at the state-by-state requirements, it's actually only 13 states that incorporate service learning into their social studies curriculum. And so the commission was trying to move to the point where you can have service learning in every classroom for every student. And the first step towards that is to establish a service learning fund, so $250 million per year, to create this fund to encourage and promote service learning. This would be run by the Corporation for National Community Service. And there'd be several components. The first is to actually just get more service learning into the classrooms at K to 12, as well as through higher education. And to use these funds for professional development for teachers who are not familiar with service learning or how to implement it in the classroom. Another component is to establish a semester of service program. And this is designed specifically for high school students. So when we were looking at service, there's a difference between service and volunteerism. The Commission promotes both. Both are very good, but we do recognize that there is value to service and committed service of different durations in a way that sporadic volunteerism, we want to continue throughout your lifetime, but it may have different meaning. So for students who want to engage in long-term service programs, or whole semester or whole summer of service, we think you can get a lot of value out of a high quality service learning program. And for middle and high school students, the option of having a summertime program in between your school years and having a dedicated time to focus on service learning will be very important as well. The Commission hopes that there'll be 1 million students annually in the semester of service and 1 million students annually in the summer of service by 2031. And again, I mentioned the recognition program to acknowledge who is doing excellent work in service learning and civics education, be able to continue to address local and community and national needs through service learning programs.
So as you can hear from the video, there was a real commitment for significant increase in funding. So that $250 million a year versus what the Learn and Serve was funded at prior. So really looking at making a large investment. So there is strong support coming out of the Inspire to Serve report. And from that, we have a strong membership base of folks who have come together to be part of the Coalition for Service Learning. So organizers include NYLC and YSA, of course, the States for Service, States for Service, America's Service Commission, Peace Jam, NSLA, and of course, George Washington, the Nashman Center for Civic Engagement and Public Service, were the coalition organizers. But from there, we have 74 national organizations represented, and you can see those listed on the site here, and over 120 local and state organization members. So one of the first things I would encourage you to do is join, and we'll share that link in just a little bit, but I'm gonna stop rambling for a moment and toss it over to Mike, who's going to talk more about this.
Great. Thanks, Amy. And if you can go to the Hill briefing page, that'd be great. So a little bit of background on the programs that have been proposed to be funded with new funding, should it be appropriated. And if you can scroll down to the first section with all the text, Amy. And you heard a little bit about this in the video. And really what the approach that the Commission recommended was funding through, as mentioned, the already authorized programs under Learn and Serve America. A lot of the recommendations for other areas of the Commission's report would require authorizing or creating new programs. And luckily we have the benefit of having this existing programming already on the books. It was funded for 20 years and is still authorized in current legislation. So we get to skip that part of the of the legislative and advocacy process and go straight to trying to get funds appropriated. That said, the recommendation was really to focus in on a few particular programs, activities with under Learn and Serve America. So kind of not just refunding exactly the way that it was organized, but really focusing in on a few key activities. So of the 250 million that's recommended, 50 million is for a general competitive pool to really support districts and youth development programs and other nonprofits in the training and the capacity support and the infrastructure that they would need to put these programs in place within their institutions. And then 100 million each for both summer of service programs and semester of service programs, which both engage students across either a semester or the summer for a minimum number of hours. And then depending on the program, they can receive stipend, education awards, so similar to kind of a light version of AmeriCorps, or academic credit in the case of semester of service. And so you'll see on this Hill briefing page on the coalition site some examples of both semester and summer of service as they were implemented before Learn and Serve America was eliminated in 2011. That they between 2009 and 2011, both programs were just started before everything was cut, and so between some of the partners, including YSA, we were able to run those programs for a few years, and so you'll see some examples and case studies and information about both of those opportunities. Obviously this, if you listen to Michael Smith during the plenary, and he mentioned the report that CNCS or AmeriCorps is working on due this summer, that has come out of the advocacy of this coalition, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But obviously the specifics will depend on that report and how AmeriCorps sees this best working within the agency to restart. So this is still the stance of the coalition that we're standing behind the Commission's recommendations, but recognizing that when it comes time to actually implement, and then depending on what funding may wind up actually getting appropriated, obviously those figures and which programs they get dedicated to may change, in actual implementation. But this is still what we're asking for as a coalition. The next piece that I wanted to share further down this page, and if you can scroll to the 3 impact section, is thinking about, as we're all making the case for this, and we'll share opportunities for how you can bring this to your members of Congress a little bit later. But thinking locally, your school district, state legislators, kind of anyone and everyone that you may be making this case to. The elevator pitch, as Amy asked the Service Learning Award winners for, that we're really focusing on is the uniqueness of service learning and being able to meet 3 different areas of outcomes. The impact on young people themselves and the student and learning outcomes that we all know come from service learning. The impact on the community and the actual needs being addressed through the service part, and then the overall impact on our civic health and our democracy, and the importance of teaching young people how to participate and giving them active ways to do that, and tying connecting to civic education and diversity and equity work, and building bridges and all of those kinds of things that we know come out, and recognizing that we have a really unique story to tell, and a powerful case to make, in that service learning is one of the only things that can actually meet all of these areas and all of these outcomes at once. There are other educational strategies out there. There are other strategies out there that meet community needs. There are obviously civic education and capacity building work happening out there. But service learning really does all 3. And so I think that's an important framework to keep in mind as we're all thinking about advocating for this funding and for service learning generally, and policies that support that, because it can have so many outcomes in so many different areas. So, Amy, I think back to you for a little bit more of the history of things.
Yep. So I am going to see if this works. Oh, nope. Hold on just one second. You don't want to see that. I'm going to stop share here for a moment and switch my screens. There we go. Can you guys see the Office of Economic Opportunity there? Great. So just a little bit of a history for service learning. So the Office of Economic Opportunity, VISTA, was created in 1964, and then the National Student Volunteer Program in 1968. And then we had some significant milestones in 71 with the National Student Volunteer Programs. The Center for Service Learning was created that year. 1971 was a great year, my birthday year. The University Year for Action was in 72, so we had 60 colleges participating in that. The Student Community Service Program took place. And then we had the National and Community Service Act that came along in 1990. So this is really where that connection to service learning as a method for students to participate really rose up and became something that people were paying attention to, right? Like it helps foster those civic engagement, like Mike was talking about. It's not just in higher ed, it's elementary, secondary, you know, it's community service in after school programs. So we start to see this act really lift up service learning in a strong way. And there was 300 million annually that was put to help make this happen in schools. And then the Corporation for National and Community Service was in 1993. So that is Learn and Serve America, where we talk a lot about that federal funding for service learning. So the school-based, community-based programs that received funding and the higher ed institutions. So when Michael was talking this morning during the plenary session about, you know, the last decades, you know, everyone's talking about Learn and Serve funding, right? And that was what was zeroed out. So, you know, in 1993, we could see, you know, 1.7 million students annually were being engaged through service learning. The funds were matched 1-to-1 in higher education and ramped up. So the program, you know, they were ramped up over 5 years. So you could see the funding coming through the lead education agencies, through nonprofits, through higher ed, so those sub-grants into schools. So there's really strong support for service learning to really blossom through K-12 and in higher education. And then the Edward M. Kennedy Serve America Act was in 2009, and that authorized $97 million. And 43 million in appropriations. So that was the summer of service, the semester of service, the youth engagement zones, the research, the service learning clearinghouse were funded through the Edward M. Kennedy Serve America Act. So again, strong investment in the infrastructure for service learning. And then we come to 2020. So it's been, you know, nearly well over a decade that those funds were zeroed out, and now we're seeing the effects of that, right? So we need to support that reinvestment in Learn and Serve America. It's still authorized, like Michael said, you know, at $250 million. That would be a huge increase in prior investment, and would go to state service commissions, again, to those lead education agencies, to nonprofit organizations, through the Corporation for National and Community Service, so that we could bring K-12 service learning and post-secondary, you know, higher education service learning, rebuild that infrastructure and get young people re-engaged. So that's kind of the history of where things were and where we're hoping will be in the very near future.
Yeah, so I'll jump in with some specific updates on the progress the coalition has made over the last 2 years since we formed after the commission's report. And as I mentioned earlier, the great benefit that we had in the recommendation being refunding an already authorized program, again, is that we didn't have to try to go to Congress to create a new program like so many others do. So we were able to focus right in on appropriations, the appropriations process, which, as you probably know from if you follow the news at all about national politics, the federal budget is always a big deal and big discussion, and obviously have led to lots of almost government shutdowns or full government shutdowns in the last few years. So it's it's not an easy process by any means, but certainly again is easier than having to create a new program from scratch. So the other benefit for us as a coalition and as a field is that the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut, was involved in writing a lot of the service learning programs during the Kennedy Serve America Act negotiations in 2008 and 2009. And she was actually the lead sponsor of both the Summer of Service and Semester of Service programs, which if the recommendation was followed, is 80% of the recommended funding. And those were her programs that she helped create. And so we had a really strong case to make in going to her now that she's in charge of appropriations, or at least the Appropriations Committee in the process, to get her to really push putting that funding back in, for programs that are really her legacy. So we really focused then on trying to make the case and get other members to indicate their support. So that, as chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, she just can't put it in as her pet project. She obviously has a lot of power, but needs, the request to come from other members of Congress and to have the support of lots of members of Congress. So that's really what the coalition focused on during the last budget process, and wound up with a Dear Colleague letter led by Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez out of New Mexico. Had, I believe, 10 additional signers last year. And then during the negotiation process, the committee just realized that they were putting a lot onto CNCS and AmeriCorps. If you're not, I think Michael maybe mentioned this, but they got an extra $1 billion plus out of the rescue plan legislation last year. There's lots of talk about the expanded climate corps. They've done stuff with FEMA and the CDC, and they have a new public health corps in response to the pandemic. So a ton going on, and it just became obvious that to kind of add kind of restarting Learn and Serve on top of all of that may not be doable in the current fiscal year. So what they wound up doing in last year's budget is putting in a requirement that AmeriCorps, the agency, does a report on how they and what steps they need to take to restart Learn and Serve America, and basically giving them a year to prepare, and then really looking at the FY23 appropriations process, which is what we're in right now. And so that report language is on the coalition's website. If you look at the news section, there's a story about that if you're interested in diving into those details. And we're happy that Michael Smith is on top of this and is committed to us, that they're taking this seriously and that they're working on it. He mentioned it in his remarks that this report is coming this summer. So that will really set the stage then for how CNCS would use this new appropriations, and we will, as a coalition, be making sure that we coordinate on opportunities for the field to provide input into that, and so we're Amy and others will be coordinating with Michael's staff on making sure that we share the input of the field on that. And so then that brings us to the current budget process. which the federal budget year ends September 30th. So in theory, Congress should pass the budget by September 30th of this year for next year. We know from past history that that is usually not the case. They usually do not pass it on time, and they have to do continuing resolutions. And you know, like this last one, it was just passed in March, so they went, you know, more than 6 months into the new year before actually passing the full budget. So, and unfortunately, continuing resolutions you don't make any changes to the budget, and so it literally just keeps last year's budget in place for however long that resolution is in effect for. So, and so, you know, across the federal government, nothing new until the new budget is actually passed. So, so that's what we're hoping will get done before the election. That is often a motivating factor for Congress. They want to get that done before having to go home and try to get reelected. So we'll see how that goes this fall, or this summer and fall. But we'll be sharing with all of you and with the coalition opportunities for action around that. We again did a Dear Colleague letter, and this year we doubled the number. So there are more than doubled, 23 signers this year. And so we think that will send a strong signal again to Chairwoman DeLauro that her fellow members of Congress want this funding. And now that she gave CNCS a year to get their act together and to prepare, that this funding will be included in the appropriations bill that comes out of that committee, you know, sometime this summer. And so when that happens, then we'll be really looking to the field to make sure they're reaching out to all members of Congress to support that appropriations bill and get it passed as on time as Congress can possibly do, given their history. So that's where we're at. We think we have a good shot that there, you know, good chances that this will come if Congress can pass the budget.
And that's always the question.
So I think before we go into the kind of the next section, I think it's probably a good time to stop and see if anyone has questions on anything we've talked about. I know Amy and I've covered a whole lot and provided a lot of detail. So I hope it's not too overwhelming, but wanted to give you all as much information as we can share with you. Happy to, if anyone has questions or comments before we
Can Chairman, Lori.
Hi, thank you so much for all that information. As I shared in the chat, I didn't know the national history, so it was really interesting to learn. You shared a lot of information about things that I don't know a whole lot about. I was a math teacher prior to taking this position, as far as you know, policy and the government. For a layperson like myself and my students, what would I say? What would I do first to help your cause or our cause?
So that's actually a beautiful segue for me, because one of the things that we have done is we've created an advocacy toolkit. And within that toolkit is NYLC hosted a training for young people on how they can advocate. And so it's recorded, and I'll share a link to that in the chat within our toolkit. But it leads students through the IPARD process, with the action being advocacy for service learning, right? So choosing, is that writing letters? Is that you know, trying to get meetings with their local elected officials, like having those young people choose what that advocacy is. But first, really thinking through the investigation stage, like, what is it that we want to accomplish through this? Do we want to get our representative to sign on? Do we want to educate as many people about service learning? You know, having them think through what it is they want to accomplish, and then planning and preparing for that, right? Taking that action and then demonstrating and reflecting throughout, so that, you know, they're thinking about what's next. So we wrote these letters, right? What's next? What are we going to do after that? So the advocacy toolkit contains that webinar that you are more than welcome to tap into, you know, but young people can place phone calls, emails, help get those elected officials to sign on and say, yes, we support the funding for Learn and Serve America. But honestly, I think one of the most powerful things that the service learning field has at its disposal are the voices of young people and what they're doing, both in their schools and in their after school programs. For them to say, this is what I've done, this is, and to say the word service learning, right? Like through service learning, I was able to not only make this impact on my community, but I learned how to work as a team. I, you know, met these academic goals. I built these leadership skills. So having our young people vocalize and share the power of these experiences is what we need to do. And we need to elevate that in so many ways. We need to educate our elected officials about what our young people are doing so that they support the funding of this. We also just need to educate others about in our own communities about what's happening and what that looks like. So if that's sharing blogs or TikTok videos or, you know, whatever that looks like, you know, making sure we're really telling our story, because there are such amazing things happening. And I mean, I'm constantly doing searches for service learning stories and things like that. Higher education is great at sharing that. As educators, as nonprofit leaders, as those working, you know, we're working with students. Like, I know it's a heavy ask, but if we incorporate young people into helping tell those stories as part of reflection, as a part of demonstration, and then push that out, I think we can elevate our own advocacy for service learning in that way. So there's my, like, here's what we can do and how young people can get involved. But YSA also has a toolkit. And so let me share my screen and I'll show you kind of where. So from the homepage, you can just see here the advocacy toolkit. And here's the advocacy training. I didn't hit share. Let me do that so you can actually see what I see. Okay. So, yep. So from the homepage, just hit advocacy toolkit, and you scroll down. Here's the training I mentioned that takes you the students through the iPard for taking advocacy action. And then I'm sorry, Mike, I don't have, where's your toolkit?
It may not be on this page. It may be on our website. I'll drop the link in the chat.
Okay. So I'll toss it over to Mike because they have a great toolkit as well.
Yeah. So the toolkit that, and like I said, I'll just drop it into the chat after I'm done. But it is developed actually for Global Youth Service Day, which is this weekend if you're if you're not aware. And really how to reach out to elected officials around projects that you're doing. But all of the principles are the same for reaching out to share your story with them. And so it will walk you through all the different types of elected officials, thinking about all the different types of staff, because often they're the ones that you're connecting with, not the elected representative themselves. And then all of the steps of how to prepare messages. It has templates, and then planning documents for it, for kind of how you can split out all the tasks among yourself. So it matches really nicely with that video training that Amy just shared. We don't use quite the same terminology in that toolkit, but it really does follow that same process of putting young people in the in the position of actually doing this outreach, and provides all the steps to help you do that. The other thing that I'll share is a couple of tip sheets that we developed with help from the Mott Foundation and the Alliance for Justice around advocacy guidelines for programs. And for those that may receive, government or foundation funding where those restrictions are put into place. And I think the top line thing to remember, because I know sometimes people get very, very worried about whether they can lobby or advocate or do any of that. Thank you, Amy. There's the toolkit. She got it while I was talking. And so the kind of two reminders I always like to give people around guidelines around advocacy is that, one, you can always educate on things. If you don't get to a specific legislative ask, you are not lobbying. And so you can always share about your programs, your impact, invite elected officials to your programs to participate in projects around, lots of different ways to do that, to again, share your story and show the impacts that this work has. And then let folks like the coalition make the actual legislative ask, after you've built that relationship with them. The second piece is that you can always do anything that you want as an individual. So you kind of take off your official hat of representing your institution, as individual constituents, you can always ask anything that you want. And so there's more detail on there's more, but again, those are the two things. It is definitely okay to always okay to educate. That is never against the rules. And then again, always you can ask for anything that you want as an individual.
So Mike, I did also put the advocacy and lobbying guidelines in the chat. If you want to share, I can pull those up as well, if there's anything more you wanted to highlight from that.
No, I think those are my two key takeaways for people are the focus on education, and you can always act as an individual.
Perfect. So great resources with those links there, and I'll make sure that those are also uploaded into Whova along with the presentation from earlier. Just to say that the coalition did also hold a Hill briefing last year. And so that presentation was from the Hill briefing. So we had some good participation in that and some excellent service learning stories. So we'll make sure that we share the link from that recording as well. But one thing I wanted to do, well, let's pause because again, we've shared a lot of information and see, does anyone have any questions about the resources or advocating what you can do?
While people are thinking, thanks to Veronica and Purdue University Northwest. I saw you join the coalition while we've been talking. So, so that's obviously the first thing. Again, if you're not already a member, please join that, because then you'll get all of these updates that we send out to the coalition when there are specific kind of action items to take, and when we need outreach to members of Congress, and sharing all of these resources, and and all of that stuff goes to all coalition members. So that's the easiest kind of follow-up for you, is just join that coalition, and then you'll get all of this stuff on an ongoing basis from us in the future.
So in true service learning style, I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity for real engagement. And so I think one of the things that I love to do is to have people think about their own service learning elevator pitch, because sometimes we only have that 30 seconds, that 45 seconds to be able to tell that story to get someone interested in the work that we're doing. And so we're going to do a little exercise here. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. And I'm going to ask you to create an elevator pitch for service learning together. And then we'll come back and share that out. Okay. So we'll take about we'll come back at 5 after. And then we have a few more opportunities to share, and we'll take some final questions. So just one moment, I'm going to pause our record.
Yeah, this is Rochelle.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rochelle. Would you please state that again, since I forgot to resume recording?
Yes, yes, I can. Good learning happens when you're doing the service, but good learning also happens when you understand why you're doing the service.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rochelle. Okay, who is going next?
Group 1 can go, Amy.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori.
Sure. Okay. We have service learning is about connections. It incorporates high impact academic practices while enhancing future career skills. Students and teachers are able to connect and improve their community while promoting social, emotional well-being. Service learning builds connections for life.
Ooh, service learning builds connections for life. So we had the why
That's
from
all
our first
heavy.
group. And then this one, you guys really brought out and shared the student outcomes. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Lori. Okay, who is our third group?
I think that may have been our group, and we did not quite get to assigning someone. Well, they tried to make it me, but I'm going to push it back. So I think, Sherilyn, I think you had the most complete and had jotted down notes. And so I think if you can say yours, I think that's the most comprehensive one out of our group, and just add the skills piece in that the other person added.
She says no.
All right.
No, she didn't say no, but. Aww.
So anyway, I won't get all the words right, but it was basically about that double impact of, there's the service and making a difference in community, and then really bringing learning to life and skill building and all that great stuff. So really, it's a pretty simple concept when it boils right down to it. It's right there in the name. There's service that happens. There's learning that happens.
Perfect.
And that's what it is.
Thank you. So I think, just that idea of really having to sit down and think about what it is that service learning does, what it is in our own context, and being able to articulate that is so important. It's important for us to be able to do that. It's important for our students to be able to do that. So I do encourage you to think about how you can engage with your students to be able to share in a really succinct way the impact that service learning has had on them, so that they can share it with others. And so with that, I did put in the chat, I hope that each and every one of you will consider joining the Coalition for Service Learning. Mike shared the link earlier when I mentioned it, but it really is, it's an opportunity to stay up to date on what's happening, to be able to meet others who are in this space. Like, we all work in, we have work to do, right? Like, we're teachers, we're educators, we're leading after school programs. And so sometimes this policy world can be a little like that thing over there in DC that we don't feel connected to. The Coalition is a space where we can ask questions, where the community can really learn what they can do and like in easy chunks and how to take action, but it's also a space where we can connect and learn from one another. So so I just encourage you to consider joining and being part of it and just staying up to date. It's not a scary space. It's a Zoom meeting. It looks just like this. And Mike does a great job of keeping out, sending out the communications, like, this is what's going on, this sort of thing. So like I say, please consider joining. The other opportunity I'll share after. Mike, you're going to talk about connecting with members of Congress. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead, so I'll throw it over to you.
Sure. Yeah, and like I said, the easiest way to kind of keep up of when we have these specific requests of the field of all of you to reach out is when you join that coalition. We'll just send out the message of like, hey, we need you to send an email or make a call about whatever is being considered at the time. And so, like I said, the next opportunity will really be around when the Appropriations Committee is considering the appropriations bill, and we expect that to happen maybe by the end of May, but we'll probably wind up extending into the summer. So we'll hopefully still catch you all before the end of the school year. And then when the full Congress is doing the full budget later on, and that will likely again not be until the fall, unless Congress really surprises us. But in the meantime, I think what's really important is that as much as possible to be building these relationships with members of Congress and their staff, and what we want to point out to people is that it's not necessarily a relationship with someone here in Washington, D.C., where I am, but every member of Congress has district offices, usually multiple offices throughout their district, where there are staff that are assigned to all these different issue areas. And so you can connect with the education and national service staffer in the district office that's closest to you, and they can participate in your events, your activities. It's really easy to get them out and do that, and then they're going to be your best channel to the member of Congress themselves. Is you get that staff advocate on board, and knowing who you are, so that when you shoot an email to them saying like, hey, I have this request since I'm a member of this Coalition for Service Learning for this funding that could really help our school or our program or our district, then they know who you are, and it's so much better than instead of just kind of that cold contact that they get from everyone when it comes time, because everyone is asking for money all over the place, in the federal budget. So that it just makes the request that much stronger when you have that existing relationship with them. So that's our ask of coalition members, is that yes, to kind of take action on when we send out alerts for things that are time sensitive, but before that, to really build as many relationships as you can with people and staff in your district, so that when those action alerts come, you have those relationships to go back to.
And then I would just add too that having just kind of stepped into this space of advocacy myself, I've actually been surprised at how welcoming our local, like our state representatives and our local representatives have been. They want to hear, right? They want to hear what we're doing and the impact we're making. And a lot of them have a direct connection to service. And so the other opportunity I want to make sure you are all aware of, and I am very cognizant that our time is like up, but is that we are looking for young people who want to be champions for service learning. So these are young people from different ages that want to have full intentional partnership with the coalition. So it's an opportunity for personal and professional development for these young people. They will have an authentic voice in decision making. We will work with them to train them around service learning policy at the local, state, and national level. They will help advise their peers and adults on the topics around service learning. So youth voice, youth leadership, community engagement, civic life. And we will ensure that they have a safe space to grow and lead alongside the adult coalition members. So there's an application on the coalition website under on the advocacy page. There's a link here to learn more and apply. If you know a young person who you're like, you know what, I think this is this is something that they would really be interested in, we encourage them to apply and really walk alongside the adult members of the coalition and represent young people who want to see more service learning opportunities for their peers across the country. So I hope that, one, you will join the coalition, that you'll reach out to us if you have questions, and that you'll encourage your young people to help share their voices so that we can really see funding come back to support service learning across our K-12 in and out of school time institutions. So thank you all for being here today, for engaging in my elevator pitch activity, and I hope you have a great rest of your conference.